185 years into the future, humankind has reached the stars, colonized several star systems, clashed with an enormously powerful alien empire, and survived against all odds. It has not won anything yet, but it has survived. An uneasy truce with the Hegemony has utterly transformed the political and military landscape of the human sphere. Humanity's former alien adversary is now an unwelcome ally, another force to be taken into account when it comes to forming alliances and strategizing. But at what cost? However, the situation on the outskirts of the human sphere is not any better. Shinju, the newly discovered planet that is coveted by all, has been treacherously seized by the Greater Independent Japan and its military force, the JSA, from the hands of Pan-Oceania, the preeminent international power. The wealth of ancient artifacts from a bygone civilization that thrived on this forsaken planet is beyond measure, considering the competitive advantage that any technology found there could bring to the table. And even if the JSA has control over the majority of the planet, the other powers of the sphere, as well as the combined army, have established their own outposts and plan to expand their territories using deniably covert actions. Pan-Oceania relies on its kestrel colonial force to carry out these clandestine actions, and because of this, they have become the main adversary of the Shinden Butai, the JSA's branch on Shinju. A peaceful future for humanity has never been more in doubt than it is at this moment. The capital planet of humankind, Concilium Prima, has been ravaged by the Tazeki digester, and with the combined army entrenched in the very heart of the human sphere, the danger of being completely annihilated is quite real. Whether the aliens succeed in grabbing the mysterious artifact or their plans are ultimately thwarted. It appears to be a no-win situation, but this does not mean that O12, the future United Nations, is just going to let this happen on its watch. Its brand new Torchlight Brigade will be unleashed to show the true level of its commitment to the human sphere. As for Paradiso, it is no longer a planet at war, but that does not mean that it is not disputed any longer, because all humans desire to regain the territory and the resources the combined army appropriated from them. So the behind-the-scenes conflict there is continually ongoing. In this context, it is the intelligence services and the special operations commands who script the course of history under a veil of secrecy with their furtive operations and covert actions. The war for domination and primacy in the human sphere still rages on, but in a surreptitious and decidedly underhanded manner. Never has an infinity code been more appropriate to classify this precarious state of affairs. Massive, internationally owned trade ships use wormholes to jump from one star system to the next in a network of looping routes known as circulars. Circulars are administered by an intergovernmental organization called O12, an offshoot of the United Nations that has been vested with greater autonomy and capacity to enforce its decisions than its predecessor ever had. A single artificial intelligence named Aleph is allowed to exist with the purpose of aiding O12 to maintain the fragile balance of power. With its unfathomable power and its ubiquity across the human sphere, Aleph has become indispensable for the powers that be, even as they struggle amongst themselves. The old nations slowly agglomerated into a few great federated blocks and claimed as their own those star systems that could sustain human life. These new superpowers, although mightier than the old ones ever were, are still motivated by the same compulsions that have always driven human history: living space, resources, and power. Coexistence is hard when everyone is competing for the same things. Friction is constant, and confrontations, open or covert, high or low intensity, brief or prolonged, are commonplace. These are not dull times to be a soldier. Pan-Oceania is the number one, the greatest power in the human sphere. It has the most planets, the healthiest economy, and the most advanced technology. Pan-Oceania is a true melting pot of cultures that, with their pragmatic and generous character, consider themselves the defenders of the Western traditions of democracy and welfare. Pan-Oceanians are a proud people who might come across as slightly conceited with their constant reminders of the technological superiority of their society and particularly their army. Its challenger, its perpetual opponent, the other great power, is Yu Jing, the Asian giant. The whole of the Far East, united under the banner of what once was China, has produced an integrated but heterogeneous Oriental culture. Equipped with a blooming industrial sector, state-of-the-art technology, and astounding economic growth. Yu Jing is ready and willing to demand the dominant position to which it feels entitled. Haq Islam, the new Islam, is a minor power spread across only a single planetary system, Burak. Haq Islam has built a culture around a humanist, scholarly version of Islam that is in constant contact with nature and rejects all fundamentalism. Biomedical science and terraformation are the two pillars of their development, and Haq Islam is home to the best academies of medicine and planetology in the human sphere. The Nomads are a coalition of 3 colossal ships, whose inhabitants, dissatisfied with a society run by faceless macroeconomic interests and the AI Aleph, decided to break away and create their own societies in space, moving between systems and trading with the locals. Tunguska lives off the traffic and storage of information, Corregidor offers skilled labor at competitive prices, and Bakunin specializes in all that is exotic, illegal, or both, from fashion to nanoengineering. Ariadna was founded by the descendants of the first human colony ship, thought lost when it disappeared into a wormhole. Isolated on an unknown hostile planet, Ariadnans, mainly Cossack, American, Scottish, and French in origin, became a tough people. Now that the human sphere has regained contact with them, the Ariadnan nation strives to be recognized and respected despite its technological impairment. After the uprising that liberated it from Yu Jing's yoke, Greater Independent Japan was totally dependent upon its allies. Determined to regain its past glory, it would seize a large part of the newly discovered planet of Shinju, earning the enmity of the rest of the sphere. But a society rebuilt around the way of the samurai, with an army like the JSA defending it at Katana Point, fears no one. Acknowledged or not, whatever battlefronts can be pinpointed are mainly located on those planets or systems begrudgingly shared by more than one nation. Cold, hard Svalaheimer, the suffocating jungles and devastated cities of Paradiso, the thick woods of Dawn, the endless void around Human Edge, and the arid territories of Shinju. Some of these names are newly coined. Already they have a long history written in blood. The escalation of violence has given rise to numerous non-aligned armies, which comprise military forces from small powers and mercenary companies, to the dismay of O-12 and Sword 4, its well-equipped but small military police force. And while humanity devours itself, a new threat, perhaps the most fearsome that's ever been, has managed to establish a foothold in the human sphere. A combined army of several alien races, united under the banner of the Hegemony and led by the evolved intelligence, a supreme artificial intellect with ancient origins and ambitions of conquest over any race that crosses its path. This is a virtually unstoppable expeditionary force that has taken hold of lands on several planets and has become an uneasy ally after a truce signed only for its own interest, a situation that could change at any moment. War in the human sphere is a nuanced thing. There's much more going on than meets the eye. There are hardly any open military fronts, and all conflicts are carried out covertly. The clashes between the great powers are conducted in whispers and shadows. International pressure and O-12's armed vigilance don't allow for large military ventures in a scenario as complicated as the current one, with an alien invader grudgingly admitted within the sphere. Conflicts are carried out clandestinely, with targeted actions in remote areas, false flag operations, or through proxies. These actions are connected to economic, industrial, and commercial activity, and to the interests of the great powers and the corporations that sustain them. Restrained moves with the aim of crippling the adversary or gaining some advantage, but without escalating the conflict. Operations veiled under the cloak of intelligence services, where all true intentions are concealed and everything you see and hear is a lie. The same thing happens on the battlefield, or rather in the theater of operations. You may think you see what happens on the ground, but there's much more going on behind the scenes that you're missing. Aero remotes plant micro-nodes everywhere in the area to build a robust datasphere for the operations of tactical hackers. Sentinel remotes backed up by satellite surveillance provide invaluable data for the command and control network and the EVO hackers, the strategic cyber operators who control from a long distance, sometimes even from orbit, the entire invisible datasphere and the peripherals that support it. In addition to that, there are all the airborne autonomous killer devices deployed to shoot down enemy aero remotes. There is a massive swarm of tiny flying robots over the area of operations that any casual observer might not notice, but which is essential for tactical hackers. These are the cyber operators who work directly on the ground, making the most of command and control networks to provide better intel and more accuracy for the actions of the rest of the troops, especially the robotic ones, but also to hinder enemy operations by disabling any resource they have, be it quantronic or physical. They will corrupt the enemy's datasphere, disrupt its systems, jam, and even cripple enemy remotes and armored troops, take out other hackers. Anything that is networked will be a target for them. But none of this will suffice if you don't have the muscle to back it up, and there is no better muscle in the human sphere than armored troops. The exoskeleton technology that enhances the capabilities of its operator, wrapped in protective armor and coupled with self-medical systems that monitor their vital signs and help heal or contain any physical damage they may sustain, has become a dominant feature in any area of operations. This tech materializes in two types of troops differentiated by their size: heavy infantry and tags. Heavy infantry troops are equipped with servo-powered armor that allows them to resist damage, operate in toxic environments, run faster, jump farther, and be more accurate and lethal. In short, be all that they can be. And if heavy infantry are the foot soldiers of the future, tags, or tactical armored gear, are their massive, super-powered equivalent. Humanoid weapons platforms standing over 10 feet tall, they are the modern equivalent of tanks. More dynamic, more versatile, and still capable of packing heavy artillery, they are the armored solution to modern-day asymmetric operational settings, engineered to operate in urban areas, tunnels, and the narrow corridors of orbital stations and bases located underground or on the surface of asteroids and planetoids. The kind of places where a tank doesn't fit, or its mobility might be severely impaired. Thus, tags have emerged as the main offensive resource for any restricted or covert action, since just like the heavy infantry, many of them feature stealth technology and thermo-optical cloaking systems. After all, modern warfare requires that enemy troops can't see you, and even the media has no idea that you exist. Nevertheless, a hulking, invisible war machine is not the nastiest surprise you may come across on a battlefield in the human sphere. Stealth technology is also used by swift, sneaky assassins, highly skilled in martial arts and the use of bladed weapons, or by deadly snipers who can take down targets from the other end of the area of operations by implementing the surveillance systems of that swarm of unseen aero remotes. But that hidden swarm can also be used to track down those hidden enemies and terminate them with precision-guided munition. The swarm can also assist a tactical hacker provide flight support to troops being deployed to the front line via an orbital or suborbital dive, both from spacecraft at a low orbit and from a carrier flying at high altitude, either inside a drop pod or using a jetpack that will also allow them to bound around on the ground with high jumps and a limited flight capability. The varying robot units can also be just as dangerous because they perform all kinds of roles in combat, from tracking hidden threats to taking care of logistical and supply tasks, performing tactical combat functions like those of other troops, providing artillery support, and even acting as loitering munition. Since they first were deployed on the front lines, remotes have consistently demonstrated that, in combat, they are a soldier's best friend. However, high-tech is not the only thing that troops should fear in these covert wars, since those who don't have access to state-of-the-art technology often resort to alien assets found on the many exotic planets that are part of the human sphere, from vicious alien canids with enhanced senses and nasty claws to alien werewolves and werebears that can easily tear through the most steadfast of soldiers and militias of amphibious creatures hailing from the deep and dangerous seas of ocean worlds. Those who do not have access to such monsters may have also created their own creatures, such as modified beasts, used to compete in illegal fighting rings, and dolphins with enhanced intelligence turned into daring spacecraft pilots. Furthermore, cyber implants and advanced medicine have been used to develop different super soldier programs that have a common goal of achieving the strategic advantage that leads to victory against the enemy. There are also special recon teams for recovering the cubes of troops who have fallen in combat, so they can be recycled into action by downloading their consciousness, memories, and expertise into new biosynthetic bodies. Not to mention the AI personality aspects that are perpetually connected to an uplink, so they can switch from one of such bodies to a different one at will. Essentially, warfare technology is relentlessly driving us toward transhumanism, but it is doing so surreptitiously and under a label that reads highly classified. The common saying, "That which you cannot see can kill you," could not be any truer when it comes to the current conflicts in the human sphere. It's not just all these devices and troops that are out of your sight in the area of operations lying in wait to kill or maim you, but rather it is the conflict itself that will go completely unnoticed because it won't be reported in your newsfeed, even though it is guaranteed to have a major impact on your life. Covert conflicts, even when they have limited effects, also come at a cost. You may lose your job when your company goes bankrupt due to a malicious episode of corporate espionage, or your favorite snack may stop being available in the online supermarket because the ingredients needed to make it no longer exist after an eco-terrorist attack, or you may find yourself caught in the middle of a firefight during the abduction of a leading scientist by a rival corporation. It's an easy thing to digest when one is sacrificed on the altar of the great power's spurious interests, and it is even easier to digest when that sacrifice is concealed under countless veils of secrecy and disinformation. Such are modern-day conflicts, invisible perhaps, but still quite deadly. After over a century of expansion across the galaxy, the concept that we are not alone in the universe struck most humans as if it were a runaway comet. We are not considering underdeveloped races such as the Antipodes or the Helots here. We are talking about ancient civilizations that span countless star systems and possess overwhelming military might. First, it was the alien ruins found on Paradiso, the Cosmolites, and that stirred our collective curiosity, which had been dormant for ages. This spark of inquisitiveness was a clarion call to the evolved intelligence, the ruthless alien AI that rules the Hegemony with an iron fist. The is a vast empire bent on a quest for transcendence, an evolutionary leap into what could be described as divinity. This search could also lead to discovering answers in the ruins found on Paradiso. And as it happened, the combined army, the military branch of the Hegemony, landed on that planet, and the human sphere had to set aside all internal and external quarrels to present a united front and prevent Paradiso from falling into their hands. However, the combined army was not the only visitor that our awakening brought to our shores. The Tohaa trinomial, an alien civilization that had been waging a war of attrition with the Hegemony for decades, landed on Paradiso as well. Since the Tohaa were the enemy of our enemy, it should have been easy to forge an alliance with them, but things like that are never simple. This species was looking for the same thing as the EI, Tazeki Digester, an alien device of unknown origin that records history and contains the mysteries of countless extinct civilizations from all over the universe. For the Tohaa, protecting these digesters is the driving principle of their civilization, for they are convinced that at some point in the future they will be rewarded by the all-powerful creators of these artifacts. In contrast, the EI believes that the secrets of the digesters are waiting to be plundered by those who know how to profit from them. Those conflicting viewpoints led to a never-ending war that is now ravaging planet Paradiso and transformed it into yet another battlefront, trapping humankind in between these two vast alien powers. The discovery of one of these digesters hidden in a cosmolite, alien structures scattered deep in the jungles of Paradiso, triggered an attack by a cell of the Tohaa triumvirate. This is a powerful shadow group that will protect the digesters by any means necessary, then extract the knowledge within them in order to advance the Tohaa race. The digester was secured by Achilles and his steel phalanx, then brought to the sanctuary at the Penny Arcade, a top-secret research facility. But this bold move only made the EI and the Triumvirate shift their focus of attention from Paradiso to the core of the human sphere. In the years that followed, the combined army carried out various infiltration missions in the human sphere using large-scale diversions, such as the assault on Wotan, the jump gate that connects Paradiso and Svalaheimer. The forces of the EI also took advantage of the chaos resulting from the uprising, when the Japanese nation fought for its independence from Yujing and became a new minor but thriving power, to consolidate their beachheads on planets Dawn and Svalaheimer. However, their greatest incursion came with the so-called Third Offensive on Paradiso, when they conquered a good portion of territory and captured precious positions, such as the Teutonic Order's Fortress Monastery of Strelsau and the space elevator of Gezira. One of the actions of this Third Offensive with the heaviest repercussions was the destruction of the Daedalus Gate, which connected Paradiso to the Tohaa systems. Due to this action, the Tohaa forces found themselves stranded and isolated in the human sphere. Nonetheless, this vile deed was not perpetrated by the combined army, but by the Tohaa triumvirate, with the aim of encouraging a gracious attitude toward an increased Tohaa presence within the human sphere, which would then allow them to pinpoint the possible location of the Penny Arcade. Humanity was in dire straits, and things weren't getting better for around that time. The Defiance made its return. It was an experimental spaceship engineered to travel through the Acheron wormhole and take the fight to the Hegemony, carrying out sabotage and gathering first-hand intel on the combined army's plans and true capabilities. Regrettably, their crew members' warnings about a whole fleet that was prepping for an invasion were not heeded, because it was assumed that the attack would be launched through Acheron, which was very difficult to navigate and was well defended. a serious miscalculation, since that fleet was just the tip of the iceberg in the overarching schemes of the EI. Several Shasvasti ghost ships managed to sneak through the abyss gate from Paradiso to Human Edge and established a secret base on an asteroid colony known as Novi Bangkok, with the purpose of infiltrating hardware and supplies into the Concilium system. Their main plan was to deploy a warp stabilizer at the location of a wormhole that would be known as Cerberus, thus connecting Concilium to a star system ruled by the Hegemony, where their huge fleet was gathering. Even though the Shasvasti infiltration in Novi Bangkok was eventually detected and the entire Concilium system was being patrolled, humankind's response was not coordinated enough, and it came too late. The Shasvasti engineers succeeded in opening the wormhole, which triggered the so-called Cerberus Crisis. The combined army fleet surged through the wormhole, hurtling toward Concilium Prima, despite taking heavy casualties. They smashed through O-12's defenses, establishing a beachhead at Helheim. The invasion of Concilium had begun, and every attempt to repel the combined army proved unsuccessful. Shasvasti spies discovered that the Penny Arcade was hidden on Concilium Prima, and the EI was relentless in the hunt for its prize, the Tazeki Digester. Even though its exact location wasn't known, the EI's forces advanced relentlessly through the territory of Durgama while they controlled the Raven Eye orbital base. It made little difference that the finest of humanity's forces, the military orders, the Steel Phalanx, the Hassassin Society, and many other brave men and women were deployed at different critical locations in Durgama because the combined army, with the Marat spearheading the assault, finally assailed the Penny Arcade, at which point all emergency evacuation protocols were activated. As things were unraveling on the Concilium front, O-12 had anticipated this contingency by hiring the Spiral Corps, a mercenary company specializing in the detection of Shasvasti infiltrators, to provide security when the digester was moved to a new classified location. Little did O-12 know that Spiral Corps were double agents. The Triumvirate agent's mission was to seize the alien artifact, but seeing how critical the situation was, they chose to destroy it rather than let it fall into the hands of the EI, even though they knew it would bring about the total annihilation of the planet. However, the courageous interference of Tirlak McMurrow, a freelance mercenary dog warrior, thwarted the plan of the Triumvirate, even though this did not stop the digester from switching into active defense mode and exploding, together with some probes that had been extracted from it and were distributed in several research centers all over Concilium. The massive explosion killed scores of beings and also created the so-called quantum anomaly zones, QAZs. These are areas affected by waves of quantum disturbance that translate into odd phenomena such as alterations in the laws of physics, atmospheric variations, and sightings of unknown alien flora and fauna, all of which occurs at random intervals and with varying intensity. This terrible disaster struck just as the combined army's motherships were hovering in geosynchronous orbit over the major cities of Concilium Prima, like a fearsome sword of Damocles. However, when all seemed lost, in view of O-12's last defiant stand, the EI offered a truce and its assistance to contain the QAZs, averting the destruction of the planet. The advanced technology of the Hegemony could contain the progression of the QAZs, buying some time to find a more effective solution in neutralizing them. Hence, the EI would have another chance to take the Tazeki digester and the probes trapped, or protected depending on who you ask, inside the QAZs. But the EI's cooperation came at a hefty price, as its footholds within the human sphere were to be acknowledged and respected. O-12 and the major powers must forfeit all the territories that the combined army had conquered on Paradiso and Concilium Prima and leave the outposts it had built on Dawn and Svalaheimer. Begrudgingly, Humankind accepted those terms as a first step toward a lasting peace that could be beneficial to everyone. Meanwhile, on both sides of Daedalus, the Tohaa are busy rebuilding the jump gate facilities in preparation for their return. The military scenario is completely altered now. Raging, unfettered war has given way to political intrigue and covert, small-scale actions to avoid upsetting a delicate balance, since there is a new bully in town now. The most important demand made by the EI, at least for practical purposes, was that the Hegemony should have a seat at any negotiating table where the future of these planets was discussed and be recognized as yet another player in the political arena of the sphere. A sphere that is no longer only human, since clearly the aliens of the combined army and the Tohaa are intent on staying. Whether we humans will let them or whether we will be able to stop them is an entirely different question.